Helen Dalton, a member for Murray in New South Wales. Thanks for joining us on Flow.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Now, you spoke recently, I think, about your personal experiences with mice in your area. What's the latest there in your electorate?
Look, the plague still continues, of course, and the government's mouse plague package is really too little too late. So a rebate of $500 isn't much when you're spending $50,000 on bait. So people are resowing their crops in some areas. I know personally that we had a fair loss with between 5 and 10% loss on our rice crop. You could see with the yield mapping that the mice had chewed around the edges of the crop and got the grain from that. We're also hearing of destroyed fodder and grain or haystacks and bunkers too. So It's really impacting on everyone. And of course the mice are, they're not just out in the paddock, they're in our homes as well.
Yeah, now the New South Wales Labor opposition, Jenny Aitchison, spoke with us a day or so ago. She said that people wanting to claim the rebates for the baits, they can only claim them, is it right, from the 1st of July, and even then they had to have bought them after the 13th of May or something like that. Is that what you're hearing?
That's true. Yeah, so a lot of people have been fighting this mouse plague for many, many months now, since spring last year. So, yeah, it's disappointing that the government back then didn't recognise that there was a problem emerging, and they've ignored it up until this, and then they've restricted what we can claim for in those dates. But the government should have ongoing research into a biological control of mice, because these plagues come and they go, and it's a bit like a rabbit plague. We've had those too, and we've got biological controls of that. I don't understand why the CSIRO and the government haven't really pushed for some sort of research and development on controlling mice.
Well, we're now in this situation where they're looking at a fairly sort of Hail Mary approach of using bromadiolone to kill off the mice, which might have some side effects, and Labor said to us might filter through into the food chain in unsatisfactory ways. What's your view on having to use that to deal with the plague?
Look, it's a shame that we didn't get onto it earlier and really try and control the build-up of mice before we get to this point. It's always devastating when we've got a bait, just for every reason, for the environment and for the time and the money and commitment that we've got to put into it, when it probably should have never got to this stage. So it's all a bit, the horse has bolted, and now we've got to take drastic measures to try and contain this mouse plague.
And in this interview, we'll talk about the Murray in a minute. We're talking about the mice in Murray. Before we cross the river, is there any indication that you're picking up that the mice have reached the river itself and might be getting across into Victoria?
Look, I'm hearing that the numbers are increasing. I'm not sure what's happening in Victoria. I hope they haven't worked out where the crossings are and get across. But I hope Victoria's spared the pain of this mouse plague. And I really do hope that we really need a cold, wet winter to try and control the numbers. And at the moment, I think the forecast is for a mild winter, which is not good for the spring, because they can just breed up so quickly, and off it goes again.
Yeah. So talking now about the Murray, and you're probably on the same page for people in the Victorian Murray area as well when it comes to what's gone on in the Northern Basin. Now, the legislation's been tabled in federal parliament yesterday, I believe, to give the powers, or I called them the dentures, to the gums of the Inspector General of Water Compliance, who's currently Troy Grant. What's your view on this role, this Inspector General of Water Compliance? Is he going to get to the bottom of corruption and theft of water in the Northern Basin?
I certainly hope so, but I did have a meeting with Troy Grant the other day, and he didn't really give me a lot of hope. You just wonder about his powers, what he can achieve. We also have about 27 different agencies that look after water and basically have their hands in our pockets. He really needs to get on with it and really make sure that people are doing the right thing and cut to the chase with all of this, because it's gone on for so long now. So I'm hoping that perhaps they will make a difference. but I also, because he's come from the National Party, that doesn't give me a lot of confidence that things will be done correctly, and also we don't know how much money or what other resources he's been given as well.
Yeah, that was something that spoke to Terry Butler, the Shadow Minister for Labor at the federal level on water, and she said they were concerned in the budget there wasn't a great deal of money allocated for his office to do that investigative work. And I'm thinking about the ICAC investigation in New South Wales into these corruption allegations in the Northern Basin. That seemed to end up pretty much going nowhere. I'm just questioning, what is this Inspector General for Water Compliance going to find that the ICAC couldn't?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't think he'll shape up and make much of a difference at all. And if ICAC haven't dug around, and we really didn't get too many results from ICAC, only that, you know, basically the places in the water space, water management is a complete mess, and they don't seem to have taken too many people to task over water theft or whatever. So I don't think that Troy Grant will make much of an impact on it at all. Let's hope that I'm wrong.
Yeah, sure. So with the Basin Plan, and there's this report out this morning coming largely from the southern end of the basin that the water recovery targets aren't going to be met. We've talked about that on air before, about how the New South Wales and Victoria are struggling to reach those targets. What's going to give here? How are we going to get to recovering those targets, or is there a view in your electorate that we should not bother with the extra 450 gigalitres?
Well, we shouldn't. It should be thrown out. It's not achievable. And really, if this is an environmental plan, then we should be looking at environmental outcomes rather than a number, which they talk about, you know, how many gigs here and how many gigs there and whatever. We should be addressing some of the issues that really impact on our river system, and that's cold water, which is released from the dam. It favours the carp, which is not a native fish. We should be looking at fish ladders, carp control, all those things, that would improve environmental outcomes rather than trying to push more and more water down through the system.
Yeah, no, it's a good point in the sense that there seems to be uniform agreement that those targets aren't going to be reached for different reasons. So we need to have a serious conversation about whether you bother with having the target at all.
That's right. And of course they tend to threaten us and say, well, you've got to do this because now we're going to come in and buy back that water to reach those targets. That will be absolutely devastating for communities. They've got the research to back that up, that it's just not a good outcome at all for any of us. And really I cannot understand why they do not go back to tours and look at all those environmental things that need to be improved. And that includes too the management of the rivers, and which causing a lot of problems is riverbank subsidence and water quality as well. So there's a lot they can do without threatening us about more buybacks and reaching these targets.
I just thought I'd ask you if you wanted to say anything about the Labor opposition leadership situation.
Yeah, no, they're all squabbling. The sooner they sort it out, the better. Yep. We need strong leadership and a good, strong opposition to the current government. We're seeing things falling apart with the coalition. I mean, we've just gone and had a by-election with the Upper Hunter. Yes. We will also no doubt have a by-election for Gareth Ward's seat, and also John Sidoti.
Yeah. So with Ward, he has stepped down from his ministry portfolio. He hasn't resigned from Parliament yet, though, has he? No,
he hasn't. But the talk is there will be indeed another 2 by-elections. There's a lot of things that should be addressed, and the government needs to get their act together, and the Labor in opposition need to get their act together too and hold this government to account.
Well, Helen, thanks for speaking with us on Flow Today. Always a pleasure.